Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Archdale Church of Christ here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm your teacher, Russ McCullough, and we're here assembled for our Real Hebrews class, a deep dive into Hebrews. And tonight we're beginning chapter 5, and our lesson is entitled Our High Priest and the Levitical Priest. So our passage is Hebrews chapter 5, verses 1 to 3.
Every high priest is appointed from among men to represent them in matters relating to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. He is able to gently with those who are ignorant and misguided, since he himself is beset by weakness. That is why he is obligated to offer sacrifices for his own sins as well as for the sins of the people.
Okay, thank you. So that's our text for tonight. So question number 3 on your sheet. Every Levitical high priest has what in common, according to verse 1? What's their commonality?
Ordained for others,
Chosen
pertaining
among
to
men.
God, pertaining to God.
Yeah. He's chosen from among men. So they're all men, and they're all chosen, and they're all imperfect. So he's chosen from among men. All of them have that in commonality. So the next question.
It's not for themselves, it's for others.
Right. But he himself, even though he's chosen, he's like his brothers. He's in the same boat, the sin boat. So what was the basic job description of this Levitical high priest?
To act for men on their relationship to God.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Well, and specifically to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins.
Yes, that's what he was chosen to do. Chosen from among men to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. That was what he did. He is what we call a third party, or what today we might call a priest. In some religions, there are clergy people who act as a go-between men and God. This is not biblical, but that is the way many religious systems are set up. And many people believe that they cannot access God on their own. They have to go through a third party, a priest or a pastor or a person that humans call reverend, even though the Bible never calls men reverend. Only God is called reverend, and only one time. So this idea of a priesthood in Christianity is unknown because we're not going to talk about it right at the moment, but we have a high priest, Jesus Christ. So there's no need for third parties down here. Our third party is in heaven. So we go direct to Jesus, who goes direct to God for us. No human intervention is needed here. But in the Old Testament covenant, that was something that was needed. So he's a third party go-between, and in order to please God, he offers gifts and sacrifices so as to represent both himself and the people before God for their sins. Okay, what is propitiation? And I wanted, before we answer that question, according to Dan Owen, somebody look up the definition on your smartphone. Just see how it defines propitiation. It's not a word commonly in use today, but it's an important word in the Bible.
And appeasing.
Okay, all right. So how does one appease to another on behalf of somebody else? How does that work? And what would be a real life example of propitiation in real life that you could perhaps think of today, where someone goes to someone on behalf of another person to please the main party because the secondary party has somehow failed?
Well, they would act as an arbitrator between the two
Yes,
parties.
an arbitrator is a very good synonym for that. The thing I was thinking of, anybody else, I have something I have to illustrate, but anybody else have an illustration that we maybe could correlate to propitiation? Happens every day down at the courthouse.
A mediator or a
Lawyer?
What I was thinking of is a plea bargain,
plea bargain.
Oh, okay.
where the defense attorney goes to the judge and says, look, my client has broke the law. You know, he doesn't want to do time. If my client does so-and-so as restitution, would you maybe reduce or eliminate jail time for my client? They talk back and forth. That would be an appeasement or a propitiation. And that's kind of a crude way of illustrating it, but that's essentially what propitiation is. The high priest was the propitiator, if I can use that word, to God on behalf of the people, but he himself wasn't worthy to speak directly to God just off the cuff. He had to prepare himself in order to present the case for the people. So he had to propitiate for his own sins before he could propitiate for the sins of others. And that's sort of like in a court, nobody, just not anybody can go and speak on behalf of someone who's accused of a crime. You have to present your credentials to the judge. In other words, you have to prove that you're an attorney in good standing in the state of North Carolina and that you're legally approved to practice law in that court. So you have to appease the judge for yourself before you can appease the judge on behalf of others. So that's kind of the idea here. But if you look in your your textbook on page
38.
38.
yeah, I'm looking up. I need to get my eyes checked again. I was looking at chapter 3.
Mm.
All right. So, here's the quote.
Well, I just ordered new glasses today.
We're not here yet.
They won't help Russ out.
Oh,
No. Well, maybe you can give me your old ones.
Well, scratched up a little bit.
Okay. What Dan defines this as appeasing the justice of God because of the offenses of mankind against that justice. So that's pretty much it. There's no one. God looks down. This is before Christ, of course, and looks among the people. Is there somebody in and among the people that is worthy of standing before me to defend the people that have offended me. And he says, no, there's not. So he says that if someone from among you, of the family of Aaron, if they come to me having purified themselves for their own sins, then I will accept that person in my court of justice to appease for the sins of the people. That's kind of the way it worked. The high priest was no better or any worse than anybody else, but since he was the one that was chosen, he had to atone for his own sins before he could atone for the sins of anybody else. And that's propitiation. That's kind of appeasement, at least as I understand it. So number 6, how could the Levitical high priest relate to those he served according to verse 2 in our text tonight?
Because he was weak, just like they were.
Yeah. I like the way the ESV renders it.
Mhm.
He can deal gently with the ignorant and the wayward,
Right, yeah.
since he himself is beset with weakness. So the credentials for the high priest is that he's ignorant, he's wayward, and he's weak. Not a very high standard, but then again, you couldn't get any higher than that among men, because all men are ignorant and all men are wayward and all men are weak. So
Or misguided.
yes, yes, misguided. So God is how's it? He's making lemonade out of lemons. He's working with whom he has to work. And the ironic thing about it all, if you read through the Old Testament, you can run across some really bad high priest, and yet they still had to function on behalf of the people every year on the Day of Atonement. So you had the ones that come to mind first were Caiaphas and Annas, the high priest that convicted Christ of false charges. You can't get more ignorant and wayward and weak than that, but yet the office, God honored the office, but not the man, on behalf of the people, because God knows the hearts, and these guys were as wicked as they come, but still, until Christ died, that was the way it worked. And it shows the, at least in my mind, the graciousness of God, the mercy of God on his people, that even if the high priest is wicked as they come, God is going to honor the office because that's what he put in his covenant. So even Annas and Caiaphas, as high priest, had to make atonement for their own sins before they could enter into the Holy of Holies and atone for the sins of the people, which they did in their priestly office. It's just amazing that God would be so gracious. Okay. We talk a lot about people relating to other people, transparency and all these things. The high priest was no better or worse than the people he atoned for. Because it wasn't about him and it wasn't about the people, it was about God. That's what it's all about, is about God. Okay, anybody have anything you want to say about that before we move on? Okay. All right. Let's go now to Hebrews chapter 2, 5 to 18. And let's see, let's have that read. Sorry, that's kind of a long verse, but go ahead.
For unto the angels hath he not put in subjection the world to come, whereof we speak. But one in a certain place testified, saying, What is man, that thou art mindful of him? Or the son of man, that thou visitest him? Thou madest him a little lower than the angels. Thou crownedst him with glory and honor, and didst set him over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put all things in subjection under his feet, for in that he put all in subjection under him. He left nothing that is not put under him. But now we see not yet all things put under him. But we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he by the grace of God should taste death for every man. For it became him for whom all are all things, and by whom are all things, in bringing many sons into glory, to make the caption of their salvation perfect through sufferings. For both he that sanctifieth and they who are sanctified are all of one. For which cause he is not ashamed to call them brethren, saying, I will declare thy name unto my brethren. In the midst of the church will I sing praise unto thee. And again, I will put my trust in him. And again, behold, I and the children which God hath given me. For as much then as the children are partakers of flesh and blood, he also himself likewise took part of the same, that through death he might destroy him that had the power of death, that is, the devil, and deliver them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. For verily he took not on him the nature of angels, but he took on him the seed of Abraham. Wherefore in all things it behooved him to be made like unto his brethren, that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make reconciliation for the sins of the people. For in that he himself has suffered, being tempted, he is able to succor them that are tempted.
Okay. This is a incredible passage because Christ here is represented not only as the high priest, what is he also represented as before here? Yes, he's represented as a human, and what else? What is he going to taste for all?
He's mortal in this situation.
Yeah.
His body, his flesh is mortal.
Yes.
People take death.
Verse 9, what does verse 9 tell us that this high priest is actually going to do as well? He's going to become what?
The sacrifice.
Yes.
For everyone.
Yes. Totally different than the high priest of the old covenant. Jesus, as he atones for the sins of the people, offers himself up as the sacrifice. What are your thoughts about that? What do you think?
I'm grateful.
Yes, amen. Yeah. Does anybody remember the ram in the bush?
The provision.
Huh?
The provision of
Yes.
Christ of Isaac.
Yes, God provided a ram in the bush that was then sacrificed so Isaac wouldn't have to die. So in that sense, Christ sacrificed himself so those that he is atoning for won't have to die. And so he offers himself as the ram in the bush. and literally crawls on the altar and dies himself. And this is something that's hard for us to understand or grasp, but in Isaiah 53, we're told it pleased God to crush him. It was the will of God that Christ die, that he be the sacrifice. It's just a hard thing to contemplate, but that's what Christ did and does for us. He's offered himself. He gave his body and his blood on our behalf so that we might be saved. And then he continues to act as our high priest, and he continues to act as our advocate before the Father. It's more than amazing, this work of Christ on our behalf. That he might taste death for everyone. And only somebody who could provide that perfect sacrifice could do that, because the blood of bulls and goats cannot be sufficient. It has to be over and over and over and over again. Never stopping. High priests have to be replaced over and over again, because they continue to die one after another. So it never ends. But Christ came. His sacrifice is perfect, so no more need for any other sacrifices. And his high priesthood is forever, because it's after the order of Melchizedek. Has no beginning and has no end. So this is one of the more important reasons why the idea of rebuilding the temple and reinstituting sacrifices is so anti-biblical, because it would nullify the perfect sacrifice and would replace a perfect sacrifice by more imperfect sacrifices that never worked to start with, and replace the perfect high priest, Jesus Christ, again with humans who would continue to sin and continue to die. It just, it's a pretty much a bizarre idea that the temple is going to be rebuilt and that sacrifices are going to be instituted again before the rapture, or whatever you call it. So it's just another aspect of that doctrine that is disturbing, because it calls into question the perfection of the sacrifice and the ability of the high priest that we now have through Jesus Christ. Anybody have anything more they want to speak about that? Okay. So why did the Levitical high priest, why did he have to offer two different sacrifices?
First for himself because of his sins.
Yeah.
Then for the people.
Right. And we've all seen TV shows where someone jumps up in court and wants to defend the one who's accused of whatever. The judge says, "Sorry, do I know you? Are you an attorney? Are you licensed? Do you belong here in this role?" And the guy would say, "Yeah, Your Honor, I'm licensed attorney, and here's my license, and I'm allowed to represent this person." Okay, all right. So the credentials are then accepted. So this is what the high priest does. He has to present his own credentials before he can atone for the sins of anybody else. He has to atone for his own sins. And it's done in a very precise and violent manner. We have very little clue as to the violence of the sacrificial system. On the days of sacrifice, literally thousands of animals would be slaughtered, and they would be slaughtered very close and very personable. The priest had to do all the killing, and you can imagine the noise and the chaos and the terror of it all. Not only the blood that would flow, and the priest and all the altar and all their clothes and the tools would just very quickly became a very bloody mess. And it was so that the people would know the ugliness of sin. And we talk about instrumental music in worship. The music was played only during the time of the sacrifice. So the instrumental music was not associated with anything that was pleasant. It was always connected with death and blood and suffering, and it was horrible. I'm told that there was this huge conduit pipe that flowed from underneath the temple out to the gate to the valley of Gehenna. It would continually be flowing blood during the sacrifice, times of sacrifice, into that horrible. It's just, well, why anybody want to go back to that is beyond me. But that was why the high priest had to atone for his own sins. He had to do both. All right, so we've talked about the details. So let's go, as we conclude tonight, let's go over to the book of Leviticus and read about the details of what we're talking about. Leviticus 16. Leviticus 16, 11 to 16.
Oh, yes, I guess it should. 11 to 16, okay. Aaron shall present the bull as a sin offering for himself, and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. He shall kill the bull as a sin offering for himself, and he shall take a censer full of coals of fire from the altar of the Lord, and 2 handfuls of sweet incense beaten small, and he shall bring it inside the veil, and put the incense on the fire before the Lord, that the cloud of the incense may cover the mercy seat that is over the testimony, so that he does not die. And he shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger on the front of the mercy seat on the east side, and in front of the mercy seat he shall sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times. Then he shall kill the goat of the sin offering that is for the people, and bring its blood inside the veil, and do with it its blood as he did with the blood of the bull, sprinkling it over the mercy seat and in front of the mercy seat. Thus he shall make atonement for the holy place because of the uncleanliness of the people of Israel, and because of their transgressions, all their sins. And so he shall do for the tent of meeting, which dwells with them in the midst of their uncleanliness.
Okay. Those are some details of, and when it talks about Aaron, who does that also include? Because obviously Aaron didn't live during the entire Old Testament covenant.
Well, all the high priests that follow him,
Yeah.
his children.
Yeah, they'd have to be of his blood, and therefore they would be, as we would say, of the house of Aaron. That's why it's oftentimes called the Aaronic priesthood. So when it talks about Aaron, it means Aaron or any Aaronic high priest that would follow him all the way till the year of Christ's death. Okay. Aaron's sacrifice was of what animal?
A bull.
Okay. I've never been around a bull. Anybody been around a bull?
Yeah.
They are not small animals.
Mm-mm.
And as I understand it, they are very strong. So I don't know how, but Aaron had to get up close and personal to this bull, kill it. And I suspect that was not an easy task.
Do we know the age of the bull that had to be? I mean,
I don't think
they're
so.
a bull from the time they're
Yeah,
born
yeah.
until
Yeah.
they die.
I don't remember reading of the age of the bull. But that's certainly something to, but let's just say, for instance, if it was a calf, a bull calf, it might be easy physically, but hard emotionally to
Mhm.
kill such an animal,
Oh,
such
yeah.
close and personal.
Mhm.
And whether it was a bull calf or a full-grown bull, when Aaron would slit its throat, what would happen to Aaron, or the high priest for that matter? What would happen to him as he's doing this?
He'd get covered with blood.
Yes, yeah. It's you're covered with death. He had to. It was very close and personal on the behalf of the high priest. So when he kills this bull, for whom is he atoning for at this initial stage? Himself.
And his house.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Yes, and his house.
Yeah. The whole family, which it's significant that one man's life is not his own. He's responsible for others, and his life is intertwined with others, and that never changes. Okay, and I think we've answered this. So who's actually to kill the sacrifices?
Aaron does.
Aaron, because he's in there by himself. So what two items was he to bring inside the veil?
A censer full of coals
Mm-hmm.
and 2 handfuls of sweet incense.
Okay, all right. Now, what is he to do with these two items when he enters, when it talks about the veil? This is when he enters the Holy of Holies, where the very presence of God is sitting on the mercy seat under the cherubim on top of the ark, or as this passage calls it, the testimony. And we're talking about the testimony regarding Moses on Sunday mornings, but why is he doing this? Why is he bringing in this incense and fire as he goes into the holy place behind the veil?
To burn the incense so that the incense would, the cloud of the incense burning would cover the mercy seat.
Yes. So essentially, we know that no man can see God and live. So God is given this procedure to Aaron and his predecessor, as those that follow him. So when they're inside the Holy of Holies, where the presence of God is, the smoke and the incense would cover up, so he wouldn't be able to see what's on the other side of the smoke. And we talked about this just a minute. What unusual word is used for the Ark of the Covenant?
Testimony.
The testimony. Now, how is the Ark of the Covenant the testimony? What's inside that ark that's testifying to something? Anybody remember what's inside that ark?
The Ten Commandments,
Yeah.
In the budding.
the rod.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Man,
manna. Yes. So inside the ark is the testimony of the reality of God, because Aaron's budding rod is in there. God's miraculous manna is in there, and then the Ten Commandments on stone are in there that were written by his very hands. This is testimony. This is evidence of God, as long as the Mosaic covenant is in force. So the presence of God is also the testimony of God.
yeah, we were talking about in another class earlier,
Mhm.
not here, not in Hebrews, but about language.
Mhm.
God wrote a language,
Yes, he did.
and at least Moses could read
Yes.
that language.
Yeah. Whatever God wrote on those tablets, Moses could read. Yeah. So it's wonderful to contemplate. But the idea here, this whole process is to atone for sins, to appease God for sins. And the people here, when they experience this, the idea is like, wow, my sins cause all this blood and suffering and chaos. It's sobering, to say the least. Next question. According to verse 14, what was he to do on the east side of the ark?
Sprinkle it with blood with his finger.
Okay. That's a lot of blood if you stop to think about it. You dip it in the bowl and then you sling it, essentially. Okay. And then how often is he to do this slinging?
7 times.
7 times. And you can imagine that would make a mess too.
What's the difference between the east side and before
I don't know.
I think before is in the front of it.
Yeah,
But does it, I don't get if it means that you do it, he does it 7 times on just the front of it, or also on the east side of it. That's, I'm kind of confused there. It says to sprinkle it with his finger on the front of the mercy seat on the east side. And in front of the mercy seat, he shall sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times.
So I'm looking at a version that says, sprinkle it with his finger on the east side. Then shall sprinkle some of it with his finger 7 times before the mercy seat.
Oh, okay, okay.
That's just one translation I'm looking at.
Yeah.
So maybe 7 times to the front of it, before it.
And 7 times to the east.
And then he's supposed to do the same thing with the blood of the goat.
Mhm.
Mhm.
All right, so on the back sheet here, according to verse 15, what is, now that he's killed the bull and,
You just answered.
yeah, the goat, he's supposed to kill a goat on behalf of whom? The goat is sacrificial for
The people.
the people, okay? And then we just answered the question. He's to do the same thing with the blood of the goat as he did with the bull. And according to verse 16, he is to atone for what 3 things?
The holy place.
Hmm? Okay,
Uncleanness of the people of Israel.
okay. And then for ESV says the tent of meeting.
Yes.
And so the priest and everything around the priest is unclean and unholy and requires atonement.
I'm sure it was a great honor to be a priest, but sounds very difficult and strenuous to me.
Oh, yes, and the priestly garment requirements were unbelievably stringent
Mhm.
and had to be adhered to. And in other places, the high priest had to be totally prepared with no variance, or he'd die. And I'm told, I don't think it's in the Bible, but I'm told by historians, I don't remember where I read this, but at least in the post-exilic temple, the second temple, that the high priest had bells on his robe, and as long as they kept hearing the bells, they knew he was alive. But if the bells ever stopped, they knew he was dead, but they wouldn't be able to go in and get him. So they had a rope tied around his ankle so they could drag him out. But at least that's what I'm told. But I need to verify that. But it was a most serious matter, the Day of Atonement. I can't imagine that kind of trauma every year after year. As a high priest, you'd have to do that. So every year you'd have to do it perfectly. And, after you've done it 35, 40, 50 times, you begin to like, I don't know how much longer I can do this.
Were they high priests as long as they lived?
Some were, I think. Aaron was. I think it was in the intertestamental period where they started rotating them. But again, I don't know. Because Annas and Caiaphas, I can't remember now who was the father and who was the son, but I believe it was the Romans that had one of them removed. But they still acted as if the father was still the high priest. He called all the shots, even though the son had to function as the high priest. So I'll have to look at that some more. But regardless, it was a horrible way to worship God, in the sense that there was nothing anyone could really do permanently about their sin. The best they could hope for is their sin got on the back of that scapegoat and ran off in the wilderness. But I suspect when the Day of Atonement was over, the high priest was one happy person that it was all over. But Jesus took all that on himself so that no one would ever have to do that again. And the people wouldn't have to go through that again. That their sins would be atoned for once and for all. And that all people would have access to God direct and not have to go through other people. It's a wonderful and beautiful thing to contemplate. Anybody have any closing thoughts? Or
Well, even in that fall, the day after fall, the day after is just the next day
Yeah.
of the next.
yeah,
first
you
day of the next new year, and you're in your sin again.
yeah you're
And you have to wait 364 more days before you get to have a
yeah you
roll
start your new
forward.
collection all over again.
Yeah, you might be rid of the last 365 days, but you just have another 24 hours on you. So today we have this, it's so liberating to think of that and think, okay, so the day after your baptism is all a matter of your repentant heart. The effort of a repentant heart. It's so simple. The simplicity of that is astounding. Why people don't welcome that. It can be really confusing. But they have to understand that everything we just talked about, though. That's the thing. If you don't
Yes.
really understand what it replaced, it's hard to appreciate the simplicity of what you're required to do.
Yep.
Yeah, and the thought of people wanting to go back to this,
Right.
why? And that's essentially Paul's argument to the Judaizing teachers and the argument of the Hebrew writer. Are you crazy? Why would you go back to this when you've been liberated from all this? Why would you reshackle yourself to as Peter said, to a law that neither you nor your fathers could comply with? Why would you do that? But still, people seem enamored with the Jewish system or aspects of it. This was the core argument that the reformers had, all of them, against the instrument. Because the instrument was associated with the blood sacrifice of bulls and goats. And it insulted the true sacrifice of Christ once and for all. His sacrifice is perfect and needs no apology, no defense.
No additional adornment.
Right. And yet, here people want to go back to the instrument, and you can't bring back the instrument. They would argue you cannot bring back the instrument without bringing back Moses and his law. Very, very compelling arguments. Very few people understand that the reformers were against the instrument, and so vehemently so. Yes, Lee? Here, let me turn this off here. Good night, everyone. We'll see you next week.